So cheap it shouldn't work. And the lifetime warranty that Hi-Point Firearms attaches to every carbine it sells, covering every owner, including secondhand buyers, with no questions asked and no proof of purchase required, is the company's specific answer to everyone who says it shouldn't. The Hi-Point Carbine costs less than a used iPhone at most American firearms retailers. It is manufactured from zinc alloy castings rather than the billet aluminum or forged steel that premium firearms manufacturers use for structural components. It weighs more than most comparable carbines because the blowback operating system that keeps its manufacturing cost below $350 requires a heavy bolt where a gas-operated system would use a lighter one. It looks by any objective aesthetic assessment like something designed entirely without reference to what anyone might want a firearm to look like. Blocky, top-heavy, the visual vocabulary of a firearm that has made zero concessions to the idea that appearance matters. It is the most mocked consumer product in the American firearms market, the weapon that gun store employees mention by name when explaining what a serious buyer should avoid, and the firearm that appears in American crime statistics with a frequency that its total production numbers alone do not fully explain. And none of those facts have prevented Hi-Point Firearms from selling hundreds of thousands of carbines to the specific population of American firearms buyers for whom the question is not which carbine is best, but which carbine is available at the price that is possible. That population is larger than the firearms enthusiast community finds comfortable to acknowledge, and the Hi-Point is so hated partly because acknowledging it requires acknowledging them. Tom Deeb was born near South Bend, Indiana, in a working-class neighborhood. He grew up understanding something about what it meant to need a thing and not be able to afford the version of it that everyone agreed was the right one. He served in the United States Air Force in Southeast Asia from 1972 to 1976, 4 years in a war theater that ended badly for the country that had sent him there, returning to a civilian economy that was not especially interested in what veterans of that particular conflict had to offer. He spent the years after his service working through the American manufacturing economy of the 1970s and 80s, accumulating the specific knowledge of what Ohio's industrial base could actually do. The die-casting shops, the machine shops, the precision metalworking facilities that served the automotive industry and that had the capability to produce components to tight tolerances at volumes and costs that firearms manufacturers working in traditional forged steel and billet aluminum could not match. The path from Air Force veteran to firearms manufacturer was not a straight line. Deeb spent years as an entrepreneur in the Ohio manufacturing economy before the specific commercial insight that produced Hi-Point crystallized. He was involved in the firearms distribution business through the 1980s, working with MKS Supply, the company that would eventually distribute Hi-Point products, and developing the specific market knowledge that came from watching what sold to whom and at what price points. He was not an engineer who designed a firearm and then went looking for a market. He was a businessman who identified a market and then designed the firearm the market required. The distinction matters because it explains why every engineering decision in the Hi-Point product line traces back to a commercial requirement rather than a technical aspiration. Deeb was not trying to build the best semi-automatic carbine. He was trying to build the best semi-automatic carbine that the specific buyer he had identified could actually afford. The commercial insight that eventually produced Hi-Point was not a revelation about firearms technology. It was a revelation about market segmentation. The American firearms industry in the late 1980s and early 1990s had oriented itself around a specific buyer: the enthusiast, the professional, the serious self-defense purchaser who understood the product category and was willing to spend accordingly. The Glock 17, which entered the American market in 1986, retailed at approximately $450, a price that was considered disruptively affordable relative to the Colt and Smith & Wesson revolvers it competed against, but that was still outside the reach of a buyer with $200 and a genuine need. The Ruger P-Series pistols of the same era offered somewhat lower price points in the $250 to $300 range, and Ruger was already the most successful manufacturer of affordable American firearms. But even Ruger's lowest price point assumed a buyer with $300 to spend, a figure that was, in 1993, a meaningful barrier for a substantial portion of the American adult population. Below that price point, the options were bleak. Lorson Engineering, Brico Arms, Davis Industries, and several other California-based manufacturers produced extremely inexpensive pistols in the under $200 category during this period. These firearms, collectively known as Saturday night specials in the regulatory and journalistic vocabulary of the era, were not designed to be reliable. They were designed to be cheap. The zinc alloy components used in their construction were not the Zamac 3 die casting that Hi-Point would later use with the specific intention of producing reliable components at low cost. They were lower-grade castings intended to minimize manufacturing expense without particular attention to whether the resulting firearm would function consistently. The California manufacturers produced firearms that were genuinely unreliable, that had documented safety issues with accidental discharges, and that generated the specific regulatory attention that resulted in California's Unsafe Handgun Act and similar legislation in other states. The Saturday Night Special Category's reputation for unreliability was earned, and it contaminated the entire segment of the market below $300 with an association between low price and dangerous inadequacy that has followed Hi-Point ever since. Despite the fact that Hi-Point's engineering philosophy was specifically designed to separate itself from that association. Deeb's specific insight was that the problem with Saturday night specials was not that they were cheap, it was that they were poorly designed and worse manufactured. A blowback semi-automatic pistol or carbine built from appropriate materials to adequate tolerances could be produced at a price point below $300 and would function reliably, not as reliably as a Glock, not as precisely as a SIG P226, but reliably enough for the purpose it was being purchased for. The lifetime warranty was not a sales technique layered onto this insight. It was the structural expression of it. A manufacturer who was confident in the reliability of his product at its price point could offer a lifetime warranty because the warranty would not be called upon so frequently that it became economically ruinous. A manufacturer who was not confident in the reliability of his product could not offer such a warranty at any price point. The warranty was Deeb's public statement that he had solved the problem the California manufacturers had not reliable function at genuinely accessible prices, and that he was willing to put the entire financial exposure of the warranty behind that statement. He founded B. Miller in Mansfield, Ohio, named not for any heritage or branding purpose, but reflecting the town's existing concentration of precision manufacturing capability. The company distributed its firearms through MKS Supply under the Hi-Point brand. The first product was the Model C9 pistol, a 9mm blowback semi-automatic that retailed for under $200 at a moment when the cheapest comparable product from an established manufacturer cost roughly twice that. The C9 was not pretty. It was not light. It was not the firearm that any reviewer in any firearms publication would recommend to a buyer who could afford alternatives. It functioned reliably. It came with the lifetime warranty. It sold. Deeb stated the philosophy in a 2015 interview with American Rifleman that has been quoted in every serious treatment of Hi-Point since his death in 2023. He said, "I make blue-collar guns. Ruger started out that way, making lower-priced guns that were a good product that won't wear out. That's hard with semi-autos. That's why I put a lifetime warranty on mine." The Ruger comparison deserves a moment. Bill Ruger built his company in the early 1950s on the premise that there was a market for reliable, American-made firearms at prices below what Smith & Wesson and Colt were charging. The standard pistol that launched Ruger in 1949 cost $37.50 at a moment when comparable firearms from established manufacturers cost substantially more. Ruger is now one of the most respected firearms manufacturers in America. Deeb was making the same argument about a different price point 3 decades later, and the outcome of that argument has not yet been fully written. The carbine arrived in 1994 as Hi-Point's expansion from handguns into long guns. The timing was shaped by the federal assault weapons ban that became law the same year, which restricted certain features on semi-automatic firearms and capped magazine capacity at 10 rounds. The Hi-Point Carbine's design accommodated those restrictions from the outset. The magazine was positioned inside the pistol grip rather than in a separate magazine well forward of the action, a configuration that satisfied the band's restrictions while producing a visual profile unlike any other pistol-caliber carbine on the market. The 16.5-inch barrel kept it outside the short-barreled rifle category that would have required NFA registration and a $200 tax stamp, the same 16-inch threshold that the previous script in this series examined in the context of the National Firearms Act's 90-year regulatory history. Hi-Point's carbine existed precisely at the legal boundary that the NFA had drawn, on the legal side of it, producing a product that was commercially accessible, legally unrestricted, and priced below anything comparable that a legitimate manufacturer was offering. When the ban expired in 2004, aftermarket 15 and 20-round magazines became available from third-party manufacturers. Hi-Point did not change the carbine's fundamental grip-mounted magazine configuration. Changing it would have required fundamental redesign of the receiver and would have undermined the manufacturing cost structure that kept the price where it was. The constraint that the law had imposed became a permanent feature of the product, which is why the Hi-Point carbine continues to load through the grip rather than through a conventional magazine. Well, 2 decades after the ban that shaped that design decision expired. The engineering that produced the Hi-Point carbine at its price point was not an accident of cost-cutting, but a set of specific, documented design decisions that each traded one characteristic for another in ways that the buyer's circumstances made rational. The blowback operating system is the most fundamental of those decisions. A conventional, modern semi-automatic carbine uses a locked breech design. The bolt locks into the barrel extension at the moment of firing, holds the breech closed against the expanding propellant gases, and unlocks only after the bullet has left the barrel and pressure has dropped to safe levels. The locking mechanism adds mechanical complexity, precision manufacturing requirements, and cost. The Glock 17 pistol uses a tilting barrel locking system that requires tolerances tight enough that Glock machines its barrels to specifications that are unusually precise for a production pistol. The HK 416 uses a short-stroke gas piston system that requires a precisely machined operating rod, a calibrated gas port, and a bolt carrier group whose dimensional tolerances determine whether the system cycles reliably across the full range of ammunition pressures and operating temperatures. These are good engineering solutions. They are also expensive engineering solutions. A blowback design eliminates the locking mechanism entirely. The bolt is held closed not by a mechanical lock, but by its own mass. It is heavy enough that the inertia required to push it rearward exceeds the breech pressure before the bullet leaves the barrel, allowing the action to cycle safely without any locking mechanism at all. The blowback system has been the standard operating principle of submachine guns and pistol-caliber carbines for over a century. The Sten gun, the Sterling, the Thompson, the Mac 10. All used variations of the blowback principle because it works reliably and requires minimal precision manufacturing. The tolerances required for a blowback action to function reliably are substantially wider than those required for a locked breech design to function precisely. Wider tolerances mean less expensive machining, less expensive tooling, and the ability to use die-cast components where a locked breech design requires machined components. The trade-off is a heavier bolt, and a heavier bolt produces a heavier firearm that cycles more abruptly than a locked breech design. The zinc alloy castings that the firearms community most frequently cites when dismissing Hi-Point products are, similarly, a deliberate manufacturing decision rather than a quality oversight. Zomic 3. The zinc aluminum magnesium copper alloy used for Hi-Point slides and receivers is a die casting material widely used in the automotive and consumer products industries for components that require dimensional precision, corrosion resistance, and adequate strength under moderate stress at low manufacturing cost. When asked why die casting was chosen as a manufacturing technique, a Hi-Point representative stated that in the area of Ohio where the company is located, there are many shops that specialize in die casting for the auto industry, and Hi-Point utilized that resource. The Mansfield, Ohio region's concentration of precision die casting facilities is a genuine competitive advantage for a manufacturer whose business model depends on keeping unit costs below a specific threshold. The resulting components are heavier than machined steel equivalents and have different failure characteristics under sustained stress. They are not, under the operating conditions of a pistol-caliber carbine used for its intended purpose, inadequate for the task. What the torture tests have demonstrated, and the torture test has become the specific cultural form through which the Internet processes its relationship with the Hi-Point more thoroughly than with any other firearm in history, is a persistent gap between the reputation the Hi-Point carries and the performance it delivers under conditions that no manufacturer's specification covers and no serious reviewer applies in normal evaluation. The torture test genre began organically, with individual shooters who expected the Hi-Point to fail dramatically and filmed themselves discovering that it did not. The form evolved quickly. By the mid-2010s, the Hi-Point torture test had become a specific YouTube content category with documented conventions: the mud immersion, the freeze test, the bore obstruction, the overcharged ammunition that different creators applied in different combinations, with the implicit narrative of each video being the attempt to find the specific failure mode that would justify the reputation. Iraq veteran 888, whose channel reached millions of subscribers, documented a Hi-Point pistol torture test that became one of the most viewed firearms videos the platform had produced to that point, not because viewers expected to see the Hi-Point survive, but because they expected to see it failed dramatically, and the repeated survival made the video worth watching in a way that the expected outcome would not. The firearm guy on YouTube documented sending a torture-tested Hi-Point to the company's customer service department and filming the return the company repaired and returned a weapon that had been deliberately destroyed. In public, for entertainment purposes, under the lifetime warranty, at no charge. The video generated more engagement than most of the channel's content that did not involve deliberately destroying a firearm, which tells you something about what the Hi-Point's warranty represents to the audience watching it. The torture test as a format proved, across dozens of independent executions by creators who had no commercial relationship with Hi-Point and no incentive to portray it favorably, that the carbine's reliability within its design envelope was genuine rather than marginal. A firearm that functions after being frozen in ice and run over by a truck is a firearm whose blowback mechanism and zinc alloy castings are adequate for the purpose they were designed for. The specific torture test failure mode that generated the most analysis was the overcharged ammunition test, the deliberate firing of grossly overpressure cartridges through a pistol that the testing methodology was specifically designed to destroy. The Hi-Point C9 pistol, which retailed for under $200, survived the overcharged ammunition test without catastrophic failure. The bolt face cracked. The slide showed damage. The weapon was not serviceable after the test. What it did not do was detonate in a way that endangered the shooter. The zinc alloy components that the firearms community described as inferior construction deformed and cracked under loads they were never designed to handle, rather than shattering into shrapnel. That specific failure mode, deforming rather than fragmenting, is, from a safety engineering perspective, the correct failure mode. It is not the failure mode that Hi-Point's engineers necessarily specified, because the overcharged ammunition torture test scenario was not in anyone's design brief. It is the failure mode that the material produced, and it happened to be safer than several of the alternatives that more expensive materials might have produced under the same conditions. The warranty story that the Hi-Point community returns to most consistently involves a firearm so comprehensively abused that it serves as a test of the warranty's limits rather than the firearm's function. A buyer purchased a battered used Model 995 carbine at a tag sale for $50. The previous owner had damaged the stock, attempted to repair it with black electrical tape, and allowed the barrel and receiver to rust throughout. The buyer contacted Hi-Point by phone, explained the circumstances of the acquisition, and asked how much a replacement stock would cost. He was told to ship the carbine to Hi-Point, and they would see what could be done. 3 weeks later, a delivery arrived containing his carbine disassembled, overhauled, refinished, installed in a new stock, test-fired at the factory with the target included, accompanied by 2 new magazines. The bill enclosed read, "No charge." The firearm had cost the buyer $50 at a tag sale. Hi-Point's total investment in returning a used, abused, second-hand carbine to service condition was everything the overhaul cost: the labor, the parts, the test ammunition, the return shipping. Smith & Wesson does not do this. Heckler & Koch does not do this. Glock does not do this. No manufacturer of premium firearms offers a lifetime warranty that covers second-hand buyers, requires no proof of purchase, and results in full overhauls performed at no charge on products that the company has no commercial incentive to service. Hi-Point does it because Deeb built a company around the specific buyer who could only afford to make one purchase and needed to know that the purchase would be honored regardless of what happened to the product or who owned it. The crime statistics that appear in journalism about urban gun violence and in the specific discussion threads that follow any mass shooting in which a Hi-Point is identified as the weapon require the same systemic framing that this channel applies to every institutional failure it examines. The ATF's crime gun trace reports consistently include Hi-Point firearms among the most frequently traced manufacturers. The reason for this is structurally identical to the reason that the most frequently stolen car model in any given year is not the most expensive car, but the most common one. Firearms that are purchased in large numbers by buyers with limited resources have short time-to-crime statistics. The interval between retail, sale, and recovery at a crime scene is shorter for inexpensive firearms than for expensive ones, not because inexpensive firearms cause crime, but because the same economic circumstances that make an inexpensive firearm the only available option are correlated with the social conditions that produce higher rates of criminal justice. Contact. The ATF's own documentation explicitly notes that crime gun trace data does not necessarily represent the sources or methods by which firearms in general are acquired for use in crime. A Hi-Point appearing in a crime trace report is evidence that Hi-Point sells firearms to people at the bottom of the economic distribution. It is not evidence that Hi-Point produces firearms that are inherently criminal tools. The online community that formed around Hi-Point ownership is one of the more genuinely unusual phenomena in American consumer culture. The Hi-Point Appreciation Society, the Reddit community that became the focal point of ironic Hi-Point advocacy, began as a space for the specific kind of humor that arises when a product is comprehensively mocked, and its owners decide to embrace the mockery rather than defend against it. Mixed into the jokes about poverty guns and budget blasters were genuine testimonials from buyers who had purchased Hi-Points because they were the only firearms they could afford, and who had found that the firearms worked, that the warranty was honored exactly as described, and that the specific community formed around the product was more welcoming than the premium firearms community whose gatekeeping had made them feel unwelcome in the first place. The irony and the sincerity existed simultaneously. The community understood that the Hi-Point was not the best carbine available. It also understood that the Hi-Point was the best carbine available at the price that was possible for the specific buyer, and that this distinction mattered in ways the premium firearms community preferred not to engage with. In 2014, the year that Hi-Point's annual production figures are most clearly documented, the company produced 132,700 handguns and 51,300 rifles from a factory in Mansfield, Ohio. with approximately 50 employees. That is approximately 184,000 firearms per year from 50 people. The production volume per employee, implied by those numbers approximately 3,700 units annually per employee, represents a degree of manufacturing efficiency that the critics who describe Hi-Point products as carelessly made do not account for. A company producing that volume with that workforce has engineered its manufacturing process as precisely as it has engineered its products. It has found efficiencies in materials selection, in die casting process optimization, in assembly sequencing, and in quality control that allow it to produce functional firearms at a cost structure that no other American manufacturer has been willing to replicate, because no other American manufacturer has been willing to serve the market that makes that cost structure necessary. The premium firearms market's response to Hi-Point's existence has been, almost entirely, to ignore it. There is no SIG P226 versus Hi-Point C9 comparison in any mainstream firearms publication. There is no HK 416 versus Hi-Point 995 carbine evaluation in any serious long gun review. The comparison would be absurd. The products occupy different price points by a factor of 10 or more and serve different buyers with different expectations. But the absence of that comparison has a cost that the premium market does not acknowledge. It allows the premium market to define quality exclusively in terms that require a premium price, without ever being challenged on whether the qualities it charges for are the qualities that matter for the specific purposes the buyers at the bottom of the market are actually purchasing firearms for. A Hi-Point carbine purchased for home defense by a buyer who cannot afford a Ruger or a Kel-Tec does not need to be as accurate as an HK 416 at 300 meters. It needs to be reliable at close range, durable enough to survive storage and occasional use, and backed by a warranty that covers the inevitable problems that arise with any mechanical product over a decade of ownership. On those specific criteria, the criteria that actually matter for the buyer who can only afford one purchase, the Hi-Point carbine performs adequately. The premium market charges for qualities that the buyers it is talking to value. It has never had to justify that pricing to the buyers it does not talk to, because those buyers have not had the platform to ask the question. It started as a lifetime warranty, the specific commercial promise that a man who grew up in a working-class neighborhood in South Bend, Indiana, made to the buyers he understood better than any premium firearms manufacturer did, and that his company has honored at no charge to customers who bought used carbines for $50 at tag sales and shipped them in expecting nothing. It survived the mockery of every firearms forum that has ever produced a thread titled, "What is the worst gun ever made?" The crime statistics that attach the brand name to urban violence without examining what those statistics actually measure, the aesthetic contempt of an enthusiast community that has never had to make a purchase at the price point the Hi-Point occupies, and the torture tests that YouTube channels produced, expecting dramatic failure, and received instead documentation of a firearm that deformed rather than shattered under loads it was never designed to handle. It produced 132,700 handguns and 51,300 rifles in 2014 alone from a 50-employee factory in Mansfield, Ohio. It earned a lifetime warranty reputation that Smith & Wesson, Heckler & Koch, and Glock do not match at any price point. It sent back a $50 tag sale carbine fully overhauled, refinished, and test-fired with no charge and 2 new magazines to a customer who had paid nothing and expected nothing. And it kept selling to the specific population of American buyers that the enthusiast community prefers not to think about, in numbers that made Hi-Point one of the top 10 firearms producers in the United States by volume. The Hi-Point carbine is not hated because it doesn't work. It is hated because it works for people who cannot afford the firearms that the community doing the hating considers the minimum acceptable standard, and because a firearm that functions reliably at $250 with A no-questions-asked lifetime warranty that covers second-hand buyers is an implicit argument that the premium being charged by every manufacturer above that price point requires a justification more substantial than the one most of them offer. And the community that has paid those premiums for years finds that specific argument, delivered by a blocky zinc alloy carbine from Mansfield, Ohio, genuinely uncomfortable to sit with. If you enjoyed this, hit like, subscribe, and check out the next video right here.